Hey, welcome back to the live stream. I'm Suzie with a campaign, and we are on with investigative reporter Matt Kennard from Declassified. Matt, we've got an international audience. Can you please explain who you are, what Declassified is, and
Sure.
how you are connected to this important day?
Yeah, my name is Matt Kennard. I am co-founder and head of investigations at Declassified UK, and we're a website which covers UK foreign policy and national security issues. And we've been covering the Assange case from the start. Well, from the start of Declassified, we started in 2019, which was soon after Julian had been put in Belmarsh. I think we started like 6 months, and we've done a whole series of articles about the legal process, about the judges, about the government role in the persecution, and many other facets of the case. We're basically the only media outlet that has done that kind of work. So yeah, I kind of know this case inside out, which is why I was very, very surprised when I saw what happened on when was it? Monday. Um, because I having looked at this case for so many years, I believed that the US weren't gonna drop it, weren't gonna, or at least weren't gonna give this sort of plea deal, which allowed him to go free. So I was extremely shocked. I've been trying to work out why they've done it, and my belief is that it's because they probably thought that they would lose the upcoming appeal in July 9 and 10, which I actually had press access to, so I was expecting to go to. Because I think Suzie, you were there for the last hearing where they decided he would be allowed an appeal on 2 points. But in that case, their lawyers were all over the place. It was the first time really that it was so obvious that the case is, well, I mean, it's obvious that the case was a mess, and violated all sorts of constitutional principles and other press freedom issues. But that hearing was, I don't know what happened with the lawyers, but it was quite clear that the case was weak, and that if he had an appeal, and that was played out over 2 days, and they were allowed to argue the substantive issues, then the US would have probably lost. In that case, Julian would have left Belmarsh and been a free man in the UK with the whole circus that would have been. Plus, he would have they wouldn't have been able to save face because they'd have lost. So this kind of gives them a way
Mm.
out. He gets to plea to one count, which, by the way, is just. I was just reading the quote that he said to the judge, which was, I was talking to my source about obtaining classified information, and I didn't realize that was a violation of the First Amendment. It's not a violation of the First Amendment, and also what national security reporters do every day in the US and the UK, or good ones do. I mean, that is what you're taught about in journalism school. I've been to journalism school. Talking to a source and trying to get information out of them is a major part of journalism. So when I read that quote, I was like, it's so crazy that this case has got as far as it has. And it's so embarrassing for, I think, primarily the British justice system, because the US had their interest to try and get him, right? And the case was weak and massively violated all these principles that I talked about. But in that case, the the institution or the organization that should have protected Julian, and hopefully you'd hope would protect any journalist coming under persecution from a foreign power, would be the British justice system. But they've basically agreed with every dot and comma of the original Trump indictment from the start. And I think that over the next years, we need to look into why that is, because I think it's a window into who really runs Britain. Because wow, I mean, how can you have a case get to 5 years when the country that's trying to
I'm not
extradite
hearing
him,
it
by the way, would be the first journalist that's ever
anymore.
been extradited to a third
Oh,
country
no, I
from
am.
Britain, was on record as being the victim of a plot by that country to assassinate him in London, plus on record as spying on his privileged conversation with his lawyers. So I think that there needs to be, we need the work. Our work's not done, me, you, all of us, because this goes to the heart of who runs Britain, and effectively it's the US empire, and the US empire runs most of the world. So we need to expose the people that conspired to keep him in Belmarsh for 5 years, plus the 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy, because they need, if there's no kind of reckoning, if there's no justice, if there's no exposure of what happened, then it will happen again. And we need to take this opportunity to show people who really runs Britain.
Yeah, that's a great point, and thank you for all the work you've been doing to sort of unmask all these sort of nefarious activities in the UK and US. Matt, you've got a really interesting personal connection with Julian because you raised journalism school. Can you speak a little bit about some of the people who aren't with us today to celebrate this win, such as Gavin McFadden, and explain who he is and why he's so meaningful for an audience around the world who won't necessarily know him? There's a number of really key figures, and we're gonna wrap up in about 5 minutes, just so you know. Sure. But there's a number of key figures, and he's a really big one, and we'd love to just honor him a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's one of the biggest. He was Julian's mentor when Julian came to London. So Gavin McFadden was a American investigative journalist who did amazing work in his career. He made dozens of documentaries, was banned from Soviet Russia, apartheid South Africa, other places. And he set up the Center for Investigative Journalism around the time of the war in Iraq because he wanted to train a new generation of journalists to do adversarial public interest reporting. And when Julian came to London, and around the time that the first releases were happening in 2010, they became very, very good friends, and it was kind of a meeting of minds because Gavin, although he'd worked in the mainstream media, had a really critical understanding of what journalism should be, and it was about holding power to account. And for him, he met Julian. This was before I knew either of them, but I imagine he was just like, this is Julian Assange is doing the work that any journalists should want to do, which is exposing power on an industrial scale. And Gavin was, I think, thrilled by the fact that this was happening. At the time, obviously, there was the height of the war on terror with all the atrocities and violence that brought. And then many people fell away from Julian. I mean, for various reasons, but mainly because journalists in the mainstream, they couldn't understand Julian because they didn't have the view of journalism that Gavin had, which is that it should expose power on an industrial scale. For them, they wanted to tinker. They wanted to kind of do frothy stories on the top, the surface stories, but they didn't want to go systemic. And Gavin actually, many people that became affiliated with WikiLeaks came through Gavin at the CIJ, and Gavin was one of his biggest supporters in the media. He was always by his side. He set up the Julian Assange committee, defense committee with his wife, Susan Ben. And his house actually in Pimlico became like when people visited from around the world to see Julian, they'd drop by there, and it was a real salon and it's a really exciting place to be around. And he died in 2016 actually, and Julian requested, he was still in the embassy at that point, he requested if he could leave the embassy to go to the funeral, and obviously that was rejected by the British government. But Gavin would have been wow, he would have, I mean, he wouldn't have believed it. It was like it was his life's passion. It was kind of I think it was a great thing for him to see before he died, because he saw the potential that journalism really had. Because Gavin he would talk to me about things like he was all about expanding the idea of what investigative journalism is, right? Which is like, if you go to Guardian and you have these Oxbridge private school people who have a very defined, like, it's an article, and we don't want to do anything else. And that's why a lot of them hated Assange as well, because or at least didn't call him a journalist, because they were like, well, he's not doing journalism. But Gavin wanted to expand it further. He wanted to get architects involved, like forensic architecture. He wanted to do things like direct action news gathering, which is where you like chain yourself outside a Ministry of State until they give you the information they want. Loads of interesting creative ideas. But yeah, and I think Julian was a very, very looked up to him. And Gavin had this way of mentoring people that was kind of unique. I've never met anyone like it. I still meet young journalists, well, they're not young anymore, but who say he changed my life. He was an electric person, and someone who was completely democratic and would help anyone. So yeah, he was. I mean, there's others like John Pilger, Michael Ratner. There's many, and then there's all the unknown people that like I meet them all the time, and I'll constantly make this point. There's so many amazing activists that have literally been out every weekend for years doing protests that no one knows about or very few people know about. But it's been a trickle. It's like you can never know when the pressure will build to a point where you'll get what happened this week. But these people are real heroes because they're doing it for they're not for any kind of acclaim or respect you should give. And there's ones like MEB, Deepa, Driver. There's many people. So and they had an impact. Like and I'm not just saying that to be sentimental. I think they genuinely did, because what the US would have wanted is for him to quietly go into Belmarsh and no one to talk about it, and they weren't allowed to do that. And they've stopped the most powerful empire in human history has been bent by the power of people power. And of course, Stella has played just a pivotal role. Like when she became a public figure, I think the whole thing changed as well, because she's just been relentlessly speaking on his behalf and actually on all our behalf, because this isn't just about defending Julian Assange or defending her husband. This is about defending fundamental freedoms we all enjoy. And if they'd got him, we would have all been at a loss, and we'd have all lost those freedoms, because the way power works is not to get someone like Julian Assange and then pack up and go away. They get him, and then they want more, and they've set the precedent, and they can get more and more. The fact Julian won is a major victory for humanity, for truth, for justice, and for all of us.